Hello and welcome to a new interview from MinnMax. MinnMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better. My name is Ben Hansen. Thank you for being here. Today's interview is about the return of the RTS, the hopeful return of the RTS. I'm a big fan of the genre, so anybody who's going out there and saying, we're going to try and make a new one, I am all for. And so today's interview is with the founders of Frost Giant, Tim Morten, who's the CEO and production director over there at Frost Giant. He worked on the Command & Conquer series. He worked at Sony Santa Monica in the early days of God of War, before eventually going to Blizzard and working on StarCraft 2 until basically the end of its life. I know it's still alive, but development life. We're also joined by Tim Campbell, who's the game director and president of Frost Giant. He also worked on Command & Conquer and then went on to be the lead campaign designer for Warcraft 3, worked on StarCraft Ghost for a bit, had a lot of different adventures in the industry, worked on System Shock 3 with Warren Spector, and then was the director of Wasteland 3 recently. In this interview, we talk about what type of RTS the new team is hoping to build, where their funding is coming from, lessons from working at Blizzard, the explosion of talent leaving Blizzard, what that's all about. So we hope you enjoy this interview about designing a new RTS. But they want to warn everybody, it'll be a while before details are revealed, but this is the early stage, right? If you'd like to unlock the podcast version of this interview, all of our other interviews, The Deepest Dive, which is a huge community game club and just help support content like this, you can head over to patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's, support us at that $5 tier to unlock the podcast feed, which is filled with all sorts of exclusive goodies. So we appreciate the support. Without further ado, here are the two Tims. Tim Morten, welcome to MinnMax, sir.
Thanks for having me.
And Tim Campbell, welcome to MinnMax, sir.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's fun to have two people for an interview here. The two Tims, I'm sure everybody brings it up. I'm sure when you two were founding the company, there's a lot of discussion about, okay, do we just go by Morten and Campbell? Is there any clear delineation you have for me here to help out?
We kind of just do Tim M and Tim C, I guess. But yeah, whatever works from your side.
One or two or whatever you want to say.
Okay,
we'll roll with.
Gotcha.
We've heard it all.
How long have you two known each other?
Great question. It's been since, my EA days. So that'd be 2010-ish, maybe a little bit later than that. I don't know. Tim C, do you remember?
Around there, yeah. Which both seems like just yesterday and a really long time ago, too.
Yeah. Was this working on Command & Conquer, or was there a direct overlap between you two at EA?
We did not directly overlap. But yeah, I was on Command & Conquer and Tim was off building new games.
Yeah, and at the time we had talked about our common love for RTS and things that could be done in the space, and Frost Giant really is kind of us coming full circle back to that same conversation that we started a decade ago. So
what were you working on then, Tim C?
I was working on some independent stuff at the time, and Tim and I were Tim was, I think this is just after Generals 2, right?
Yeah.
And we were both talking about what was next for us and things that we could do. And at the time, the stars didn't line up for us to directly collaborate there, but that conversation started something that really resonated with both of us. And so we have talked about it off and on over the years. And now with Frost Giant, it really is, I think, a fantastic aligning of the stars and a chance for us to do something that we're both really passionate about.
Yeah, congratulations for both of you and the entire company. Messaging wise, I feel like y'all are nailing it. I feel like anybody who's tried to release an RTS, even within Blizzard, over the last 10 years, at least, it's been a bit of a challenge to get that focus of the industry, to get the attention that I think the genre deserves. But it seems like every time you guys make a move or make a small announcement, like people are there ready to talk about it. Do you think people are just hungrier for a revival of the RTS genre at this point, or what do you guys attribute that attention level to?
I'd say we've just been super fortunate that the RTS community is as passionate as they are about the future of the genre. And there are other things going on. So, we're certainly not the only ones trying to make new RTSs, but we've been very grateful for the support that we've seen from them, for sure.
Yeah, we've been humbled by it. It's honestly exceeded anything that we planned for or were hoping for. The response from the community has been amazing. And I don't think it's anything magical that we're doing or anything necessarily to, anything to our credit. I think it really is reflective on the community and how passionate they are about the types of games that they play and that we love.
Yeah. I think part of it too is just the timing. I think that like the announcement of kind of the end of StarCraft 2's development in a big way at Blizzard was timed up pretty close to when you announced Frost Giant. And so I think a lot of the internet's like, oh, this will be the spiritual successor to StarCraft 2. And I'm curious if you two embrace that label or do you worry about it? And do you think it's accurate?
From my side, I love Blizzard RTS games passionately and really was a fan before I was even at Blizzard. So I think it's safe to say that we will carry forward things that feel familiar to fans of Blizzard RTS. So in that sense, spiritual successor, but at the same time, we do want to make something that's new and unique in our own. So there will be a new universe. There will be some amount of new gameplay ideas, but we definitely want to make something that fans of Blizzard RTS feel comfortable playing. I don't know, Tim, see if that lines up with your thinking.
Yeah, the comparison is incredibly flattering, to be perfectly honest. I got into this industry to a large extent because of Warcraft 1 and Warcraft 2 and those influences on me. And so both RTS in general and for Blizzard, I have so much just positivity towards them. And to really be in a position to at least do our part to try to carry the banner forward for this style of game is something which is incredibly meaningful on a personal level for me and for the team as a whole, because we really love this type of game. And really, we're just trying to deliver the best possible game we can and hopefully live up to the expectations of the fans. Yeah.
I think there are definitely fans out there that, I know this analogy might not track exactly, but kind of see whatever Frost Giant is working on as kind of the blood-stained Ritual of the Night compared to the Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Kind of like, is it just going to be kind of like a new independent version of StarCraft 2? But I mean, you all have worked on so many RTSs in the past. I mean, Tim C., do you pull from your Warcraft 3 experience more? Are you talking a lot about even going back to those days?
Yeah, we're pulling from everything. And both Tim and I have had a chance to work on CNC games as well too, and different team members have worked on other franchises as well. And so we're really trying to put all the cards on the table and just really be able to sift through it and to build the best possible game. We have a lot of experiences to draw on. Now, the model of game that we're after is pretty clear to us in terms of we're building a Blizzard style RTS. There's a lot of other different types of flavors of RTSs that are out there that are great, that we love playing as well too. But for us, we have a pretty clear target. But I think even within that, there's a lot of room to innovate. If you look at from StarCraft 1 to Warcraft 3, there were a lot of changes there. And from Warcraft 3 to StarCraft 2, there were a lot of changes there. And so we're trying to, for ourselves, set the internal goal that we're looking for about as much difference as you would have seen from one of those jumps, which is a good amount, but without changing the core of what type of game it is for players to experience and enjoy.
Yeah. Tim M., I mean, when you're starting out on this adventure to design a new RTS, I mean, are you up on a whiteboard writing down, here's what it seems like the community wants? Like, what are those bullet points you think that the community is craving?
We get a lot of feedback while still at Blizzard in terms of improvements that people felt we could make to the core formula. So we've been trying to start with some of that, but also really iterate with the community that has time and interest to talk to us on the Frost Giant subreddit. And we've even been doing some direct feedback sessions with prominent figures in RTS cool. as well. So yeah, it's a combination of some of those lessons learned from past Blizzard RTS games that we worked on and input from the community that's really helping us drive towards the new vision.
I mean, yeah, go for it, Tipsy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, really the community, if you could kind of aggregate the community all together, and we're trying to get as many voices heard as possible through this process, but if you aggregate them all, you can think of them as another developer there at the table with us. And that's how we think of them. We're not just blindly doing, polls to see popularity of different things, and that's where we're going. But at the same time, we're not paying lip service to the community. This is front and center, core to our plans. That we know our core audience. We know what type of game they like playing. We know how we want to connect with that and build the type of experience that they'll really enjoy. But we have some areas that we see as opportunities within the space. We have some ideas of what to explore, and really being able to bring the community's voice into that really helps us to temper and shape what we're building to really connect better. And I think to be more fun and a better experience overall.
Yeah. Is the community screaming, "Let us give you money"? I mean, did you want crowdfunding to be a big component here? There must be discussions about that, right?
Well, so far, we've been really grateful to have the backing of some more traditional investors, I guess, institutional, like venture capital investors. But it's possible at some point that we'll explore some crowdfunding. For now, really, to Tim C's point, just getting the design input and feedback on what people want to see out of a next RTS. And of course, it's not just one voice. Like, there are lots of different opinions about what are the best decisions to make or what are the right directions to go. But just hearing all of the considerations that people think about as players and consumers of RTS, or as pro players, as casters, like, we're talking to a lot of different parts of the community. And that really helps us try to take all of this into consideration as we move forward.
Yeah. What state is the game in right now? You don't have to explain exactly what's happening on the screen and how much health the units have, but I mean, is this in just like basically gray box playable, or is it earlier than that?
Yeah, I'll let Tim C jump in as well, but we're doing some fundamental technology building right now. And we just announced last week that we are working with the Unreal Engine, and really excited to have all of the fantastic graphics tools and prototyping tools that Unreal brings with it. But at the same time, Unreal historically hasn't been purpose-built for real-time strategy, and so there are technology components that we have to build to handle high unit counts, to handle pathfinding, collision, even just how we build a world for an RTS game is different than you might build a first-person or a third-person shooter. So we're kind of at a stage now where we've put a lot of work in on those fundamental technologies. We're starting to do some gray boxing, but it's earlier than a lot of people probably assume. People probably think we're like, deep in gameplay testing, and that's so far from the truth. Like, we are building out the necessary components to make a great RTS before we can even get into all of that gameplay iteration.
I'd imagine. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I would say that we're in the early prototyping stage, definitely dealing with gray box assets and really just trying to find the fun. Really, that's the challenge and the opportunity, I guess, is a lot of things you're going to try, and at first they're not fun, and then you have to ask yourselves as developers, well, how can we make it fun? Or are we asking the wrong question here? Do we need to reframe this and approach it a different way in order to find the fun? And then as you, over time, start finding more and more things that become stakes in the ground for your gameplay, the rest starts accelerating and gets faster and faster and faster because you already have more things to build around. And so we're right in the early stages. And I think, like what Tim was talking about, being a small company, that's the double-edged sword for us, right? Is we have the agility to pursue creative ideas, to build a new IP, to really follow our hearts on this one and really connect with what the community wants to see. But at the same time, we don't have that mature RTS foundation in terms of tools and pipeline and technology to build upon. And so UE5 gives us a great starting point, but we're definitely building on top of it and really investing in ways that we can make a high unit count Blizzard style RTS be really performant and run well for everyone.
Yeah. Are the designers on the team just champing at the bit there, coming up with paper designs until the tech's up to speed? Does it feel like people are running on a treadmill ready to go, waiting for the tech? Yeah,
we definitely have had lots of brainstorming and lots of paper design. I'm not a huge fan of having paper design get too far ahead of what's playable, though. I think no matter how deep you go on paper design, it always needs to be validated in gameplay. And once you get things in gameplay, a lot of times you can realize immediately, whoa, that was the wrong avenue to be going down. It might have sounded great, but it did not play great. And so as early as possible, I like to keep the ideas that are being generated and get them into the gameplay and really test everything from the camera perspective and with the interface that players will be able to experience it from. Gotcha.
Just in general, do you think this game needs a hook? Do you think like a new RTS game in this modern era needs to have some definable hook, or is just it's going to be a classic Blizzard-inspired RTS going to be enough for folks to grab on?
I think as development happens, innovation happens in tandem. And so definitely there are things that we've chosen to explore as a result of feedback that we got and lessons that we learned. But in my past experience, I think the things that wind up being the hooks, as you put it, or maybe the bullet points on the back of the box, they're often not things that you consciously start out with. They're things that emerge as you develop the game. So I think there will be hooks, but we're not necessarily setting out with a headline grabbing thing that we want to call out beyond. We're going to try to make the next great RTS, and there will be another great RTS. And it's, as Tim said, very much going to be in the Blizzard style. Like there are a lot of pillars that we've got around how we're approaching this, but we're not quite ready to jump the shark, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, I just to second that. I think in this day and age, especially to not just win over the core audience and deliver something that they're happy with, but also to broaden the market like we're really trying to do for the health of RTS in general. I think we will need an RTS with hooks, with interesting ways to grab players that offer some new gameplay or new experiences than they would have had in the past. But I think I absolutely agree with what Tim's saying, that those are not always known at the outset of the game. If you look at when Warcraft 3 was announced at Blizzard, it was very different than what ultimately shipped, because the developers needed to go through that journey of trying things, seeing what worked, seeing what didn't work, reframing it around what did, and then kind of doubling down on the fun. And we're going to be going through that exact same journey. And so we have lots of ideas for what those hooks might be, but it's way too early to tell which one of those will see it through to the final product.
Yeah. Were you there in the early stages of Warcraft 3's development?
No, I was actually brought in specifically at the turning point when it was being reframed from more of a squad-focused, more of an RPG experience, and being reframed into the RPS, the role-playing strategy game that it eventually took the form of.
Yeah, and that was it was called Warcraft Legends back in the day, and the camera was super close. It was kind of that transition into, let's just call it Warcraft 3.
I don't know what its original name was, but yeah, I believe, I wasn't there at the time, but I believe, the camera was more locked on specific characters and small squads, and it wasn't really an RTS where you could pan the camera around and do things across the whole map. It was like locked to your party, more like an RPG would have been. And I think the seeds of those ideas you can see playing out in the hero focus and the RPG focus of Warcraft 3, but it was expressed probably very differently in the final game than maybe what they originally were envisioning.
Yeah. Since you're such a fan of Warcraft 1 and 2, what was your first day on the job like at Blizzard when you started to see Warcraft 3? It's like, oh my God.
My head was in a fog. I thought it was a dream come true to work on that franchise and with those people, and people had made games that were crazy influential to me. I was glad to be able to, help shape the next one and put fingerprints on a franchise that meant so much to me.
What did you want to know the most about? What were you curious about when you got in there? I'm sure you wanted to ask geeky questions about the past and stuff and, get into some numbers. Sure. But I mean, at the same time, were you just curious about I just want to see how Blizzard designed something? What did you most want to crack about the secret of their sauce? At
that time, personally, for me, I had come directly off of the Command and Conquer RTS games at Westwood Pacific at the time, or EA Pacific. And so I had worked on Red Alert 2, and we were in the very early days on Generals. And so I directly went from the competing RTS team and franchise to Blizzard. And so on one hand, I was totally geeking out on, oh my goodness, I'm working on this thing that I love. But on the other hand, it was really interesting to see the difference in how they approached making RTS games.
Yeah, and what was that difference? What stood out the most to you?
Tim got to see the same sort of experience too, working on Generals too, before working on StarCraft 2.
Yeah, I mean, Tim M, yeah, what stands out to you about the big difference between Westwood and Blizzard design sensibilities?
Yeah, very different places. I, in both cases, came into projects that were already in progress. So I guess, to be fair, I didn't get to see the earliest phases of design for either Generals or StarCraft 2. But I think Blizzard is, it's a very iterative place in terms of the team is always playing the game, and other parts of the company are also providing feedback on the game. Strike teaming is a thing at Blizzard that is really valuable. I think by comparison, it was a little more traditional in terms of the approach on the CNC team that I was on. And they were both great teams and both turned out great work. But I did come away with a big appreciation for the value of just getting a constant feedback loop going on the game.
Yeah. How do you feel like you changed Blizzard's development process over your years there? Do you feel like you left a stamp in some way?
The one thing that I did take over from Command and Conquer team that I think was super valuable was the practice of having community summits. I think for whatever reason, StarCraft 2 team, when I joined it, was a bit more insulated from the community. There was a community team there with some really great people on it, and they would summarize what was going on in the community and bring that feedback to the dev team. But there wasn't a lot of direct interaction between the dev team and the community. And so getting those summits where influencers, content creators, pro players, all of these key figures in the community come out and get a preview of what's coming, but also give the dev team a chance to hear what are their pain points, what do they think the best improvements to make would be, just super helpful for us in charting the course forward.
It's got to be interesting for the community too. I imagine there's situations where it's like, I know you think this is imbalanced and it seems imbalanced, but here are the numbers. We can prove to you that it actually, by and large, is where it should be. I imagine it's a two-way street for communication, right?
Yep. Balance is such a touchy subject for sure. I think the stats are one thing, but how it feels matters a lot too. Even in eras like the Swarm host era, to take an example that was kind of controversial in StarCraft 2's history. The backend numbers weren't particularly out of whack, but how that felt to players, definitely there was a perceptual issue there that needed to be dealt with. So, it's where the back and forth, I think the community gets surprised by some things. It's probably surprising to hear that the numbers weren't out of whack at that period, but the dev team likewise gets surprised by how strongly people feel about different things. So.
Yeah.
And even that can clue in the dev team to maybe other issues that are maybe playing into balance, right? If the pure math is balanced and it's numerically fair and this is as it should be, but the perception is very strong that it's not, well, then maybe there's something playing into it. Maybe the user interface is making it harder to use certain aspects of a unit or ability that, bring it to bear effectively where it can take full advantage of its numbers and power, or things like that. And so I think a lot of those times when the numbers and the community perception are very far apart, I think those are actually really interesting times to study, because I don't think the community is wrong in those instances, but there's something clearly in addition to the numbers that might be playing into it, and that I think is usually highlights an opportunity to improve the overall game.
Yeah, and it's just a matter of effective storytelling. I mean, just some trend gets rolling online, some snowball gets rolling downhill of well, clearly this is happening. And then when everyone's watching the same streams, listening to the same commentators, it just starts to dogpile. And now it's the story is generated regardless of what's actually happening. And now you start to see it because the story. That's a whole other thing. You guys will have to worry about that eventually, but you don't got to worry about balancing now in a big way, I'd imagine. But Tim C, I'm curious, what's it like working with Tim M after all these years?
Oh, it's fantastic. So it's interesting. Tim M and I share just a passion for the RTS genre as a whole. We've both experienced the Westwood /EA side with the Command and Conquer games. We've both experienced the Blizzard side with Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2. And so we share a lot of background and share a lot of similar ideas for how to approach development and everything. but it's awesome to work together because Tim worked later than I did at Blizzard on StarCraft 2, and just seeing how RTS development matured between Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2, and maybe new practices or new ways of understanding the community or the operations of it on the business side has been super fascinating to me. And I think likewise, Tim working with me, I'm able to bring a lot of knowledge from the Warcraft 3 time that he missed out on. And so in many ways, both Tim and I kind of fill in gaps for each other in just our experiences and knowledge of the genre. And I think that the rest of the team around us does something very similar. They've worked on different aspects of these franchises, maybe before Tim or I, on more fundamental technology or even on other competing RTS games. And so we have some very vigorous discussions sometimes around design or interface or how to storytell within RTS or whatever it is. And I think that's incredibly useful. I love seeing developers be passionate about what they're building and just full of all sorts of different perspectives on it. Yeah,
I mean, Tim, I'm fascinated by your experience at Blizzard and your time working on StarCraft 2, just watching it evolve throughout the years. And I noticed that I believe on your LinkedIn, you really you were championing like, hey, I was really pushing for the free-to-play aspects of StarCraft 2, of making Wings of Liberty free and multiplayer eventually free. Was that just pure player base as the incentive there, or what were the internal discussions like from your perspective?
There were a few inputs that we got. One was from an esports partner, ESL, who runs a lot of big StarCraft 2 tournaments, and they pointed out that esports has largely gone free to play. Like, you look at the top of the charts for esports, most of those games are free to play or close to being free to play. And, I think they saw that as a good thing, both to get new players into competition, like the lower the barrier to entry is, the better, but also just player population, like to boost the player population. So they were advocating for it. And there was what we called starter edition for StarCraft 2 that the team had built before I got to Blizzard, and there was just a lot of confusion over what that was. And Kotaku did an article. Jason Schreier was the author that really talked about how, in a way, StarCraft 2 already kind of had a free-to-play mode, but nobody really understood what it was. Yep. Most people didn't even know it was there. And so looking at those inputs, looking at the need to establish a plan for what happens after Legacy of the Void, it kind of all came together and synthesized into this vision for converting the game to free-to-play. And it was very controversial at the time, I think, because free-to-play has some negative connotations. It's like, it means in some people's mind, the quality of the game isn't as good because there are some mobile games that maybe haven't been as high quality as they might have been.
You're putting it kindly, yeah.
That we're nickel and diming the player. And so trying to approach it in a way that felt right and felt good to our players, instead of like we've cheapened the game somehow or we're nickel and diming them, really took time. And I'm grateful that the dev team had as many good ideas on that front, because really it was the team itself that architected what should free-to-play StarCraft 2 look like. But yeah, I was happy to be a part of making that happen.
Yeah. All right, Tim, so this is coming. Do you have thoughts on the future of free-to-play RTS? Do you see that as an avenue for your game, or are you ruling it out at this point?
No, I wouldn't say that we're ruling it out, but I would say that we're still figuring out what our core game is. And so I don't even know if we were going to go free to play what we would sell right at this point, because we're figuring out what the heart and soul of our game is first. We want to start with the fun. We want to start with making the game what we want to make, and then we'll figure out a way to make that commercially viable as we build from there. Now, we know that there's a lot of people who love this type of game, and so what's non-negotiable for us is the type of game and the quality of the game experience. So we're starting there. And then once we have more and more of the foundation solid and more stakes in the ground, then we'll start building a business model around it and figure out what we're going to do commercially.
Gotcha. But yeah, also talking about the evolution of StarCraft 2, the inclusion of co-op. It seems like you have a designer on the team that was a big voice in the design of StarCraft 2's co-op. I mean, is that a lock at this point that you're going to be pushing in that area?
It's fair to say that that'll be an ongoing exploration for us. The co-op numbers for StarCraft 2 kind of overwhelmingly suggest that the audience enjoyed it. I think it's fair to say that's on the table for us to explore. We're, as Tim C said, still very much in that finding our way phase. Like, we're not so determined in one direction that we're just going to decide that that's the way we're going. But all of these inputs suggest things that we should be prototyping and exploring.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and we saw a strong community response to co-op when it was released, and we see there being a big opportunity around co-op, and so we're trying to figure out how that fits into our plans, how that fits in around other modes. But co-op is a really interesting mode for us in that it's something from StarCraft 2 that the team was able to see the audience numbers and the rate of players connecting with it and just a positive response around it, that it also bridged the gap between maybe really competitive players and people who may have played traditionally single player, and it got them kind of into a team experience, and it kind of got them into more of, you know, the mainline game experience outside of campaign missions. And from that perspective, when we're trying to appeal to the core audience, but then grow the market beyond that by bringing a lot more people into RTS, co-op seems like it could be particularly useful for providing a way for maybe players who haven't traditionally engaged with RTS to maybe ease into that side of things, and maybe then grow beyond that into competitive. So we're really looking of interest to us. I don't know what a final co-op mode would look like for us, though, but it's definitely an area that we're exploring.
Gotcha. It seems like you probably are exploring, you know, how much of a story should be included in this RTS. Do you feel like, Tim C, you're kind of more of the champion for that just because of your history? You're more used to directing story-focused content?
I think that's a great question. I think the team's pretty unanimous, though, that we're going to have a story in our game. And I think part of building a new IP is we want this to be an IP that resonates with people, that they care about this IP, not just the setting of the world, but the characters and the drama and the conflicts that are going on in there. And you don't really get a feel for that purely through competitive or co-op or normal matches. You get that through experiencing the story in other ways. So we'll absolutely have story. That's not something that I'm just championing and the rest of the team doesn't want to hear. Like, we're all pretty unified around that. Now, what does that mean? How do we tell that story? Does that mean traditional campaigns? Does that mean do something campaign-like that we innovate with, or do something else entirely? Those are things that we're actively talking about. I think campaigns have been approached in a very traditional way for a long time, and so we're asking the question here: is there a different way of thinking about this that could maybe change the paradigm, or that could really enable us to do different things with campaigns that might help our overall goals? But definitely a story, definitely characters for people to connect with. That's not gonna be something that we put to the side or skip out on. Right.
But then, Tim, I'm imagining you're looking back on the budgets for StarCraft 2's campaigns and being like, that's not exactly something we can pull off at the indie scale, right?
Well, the good news is, we do have a pretty good budget for this game. So I think we're not, like, to us, being indie means we get to make decisions that we believe are the best decisions for our players, more so than it is we have to compromise the vision because we're independent. Like, we're very much setting out to try to make the best game we can possibly make. But from my perspective, more the producer side, story is the most popular type of content in the game. And it's like, the competitive side is more enduring, meaning that people spend more time with it. But in terms of the number of players who play, there are actually more campaign players than there are competitive players. So both audiences are super important to us, but I see story as necessary. Like, it is, even from a producer perspective, just a really key component of what makes both the Warcraft and StarCraft series so successful.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, because traditional campaigns would be approached oftentimes as a way to try to introduce units, and then hopefully players would graduate from campaigns directly into competitive and would know all that they need to know. And we all know that didn't happen. You don't play a campaign and then be equipped for competitive play, right? There's a big gulf there. There's different lessons being taught. And so I think by stepping back and looking at campaigns and saying, we're going to do something in the space. We love campaigns, but maybe they're being used as the wrong sort of tool. Maybe there's a different way of approaching them where we can use them in a different way to assist the player experience, and then provide players with different tools to prepare them for competitive play.
Yeah. So you announced that you're using Unreal. You also announced recently that you're working with Dreamhaven as official advisors for the design of this game. This is Mike Morhaime, former Blizzard champion, his new company. That was really surprising because they have so much talent over there. It seems like, well, are they also going to be making an RTS? Or does this mean that they're not making an RTS, but that talent really wanted to contribute to an RTS? Can you give any insight into how this happened and what their role is and what the discussions are like?
For sure. The crew over there clearly has incredible experience building new universes and building new RTS games. And both Tim and I were fortunate to have had a chance to work closely with them during our time at Blizzard, and we've stayed friends since then. I think we've been really mutually supportive as we each spun up new companies, and it just really felt natural to collaborate on this. And I can't speak to what the future of Dreamhaven will be, but
Sure.
At least for now, in the near term, they are helping us out and giving us feedback on what we're building. And Chris Siggety, who was the executive producer for StarCraft 2 and who also worked on Warcraft 3, was my boss and mentor at Blizzard. So having his insights on this will be super helpful. Obviously, Mike and Amy Morhaime were both directly involved in StarCraft, and so many other folks over there from Alan Dabiri, who was tech director, Dustin Browder, who was game designer. It's just there's so many people with experience over there. So being able to get feedback, have them potentially when we're ready to start having people play the game and give us notes, like all of these sorts of things will just be super valuable for us.
Yeah, I've been in this industry a long time. I have a lot of gray hair to show for it. Worked on a bunch of games, and I'm in awe of the experience that's over there at Dreamhaven. I am super, super stoked to have them be helping us out on this. And I think it can only result in a better game. Those guys have just some fundamental experience, even back to Warcraft 1 and really the start of what a Blizzard RTS was. They have just perspective on the life of those franchises, the scope of those franchises beyond what Tim or I or the rest of our team has. And so getting their voices into the mix, their perspective on what we're building and feedback on what we're building is just something I'm incredibly grateful for. And I think it's going to really help us a lot in our quest to build the next great RTS.
I'm going to jump in and clarify one thing, though, because we did get some questions after that announcement went out with people thinking that Dreamhaven were going to be the ones designing the game.
Right.
And that's not the case. Like, we are still designing this game. Some people thought Dreamhaven were going to publish the game, and like right now that is not the case. In the future, who knows? We love those guys. Like, we can imagine a world where we do have other collaborations, but really for right now, all that we've talked about is they are going to give us advice and give us feedback as we build the game. So
here's a dumb business question. I mean, are they being paid for this? What's in it for them is kind of my question. They have their hands full and like they want to be friendly, but is it a matter of just them being friendly so they're lending their name for the sake of this announcement that there's going to be kind of a friendly collaboration happening here?
So traditionally, advisory relationships like this, there's some amount of equity that advisors get in the companies that they advise. And so, yeah, we're not necessarily sharing specific details here, but you can imagine that that's typically how advisory relationships go.
Okay, interesting. It's going to be fascinating to see. And is it going to be a two-way street? Are you going to be advising on their games as well?
We'll see how it goes. We really feel a deep bond of friendship with them, and if our input winds up being valuable to them in the future, that would be awesome too. But no specific plans there.
Yeah, I'm curious what you all think just about the kind of groundswell for independence from a lot of former Blizzard developers. It's been the storyline over the last couple of years, I guess, kind of starting in a big way with Bonfire Studios, which is still a big shroud of darkness. Maybe E3 will reveal something, but even like Ben Brode and Second Dinner, I feel like there's so many offshoots at this point. Do you all stay in touch? Do you think that's just a natural evolution of any big game studios going to have offshoot studios? Or Tim Campbell, what do you think about this kind of blossoming happening out there?
Yeah, I can't really get into maybe reasons why something like
Sure.
this is happening. My time at Blizzard was, I left very early in StarCraft 2's development, and embarrassingly long time ago now after War 3. And it was a very different company back then. It was 300 people when I was there compared to thousands now. So I can't really speculate on anything that goes on at Blizzard, but I do think that one of the comments you made there is very natural, that as big companies get bigger and they get more entrenched and they focus on very specific opportunities, there often are offshoots that spin out and grow up, and eventually those will go on to do things and maybe become the big companies themselves in the future. And we've seen that happen over and over throughout the industry. So I wish Blizzard well. I loved my time there, and I am still a very deep Blizzard fan. But I also we feel some amount of support and respect for people who are taking the risk to roll the dice and start new studios, and we wish them well too. So there's definitely it's something here that we feel supportive on both sides of the fence, right?
Of course,
we love Blizzard and want to see more Blizzard games succeed, but we also are rooting for the startups that they'll be able to really take root and succeed.
Yeah, Tim M., what's the right size for a company? When does a company get too big? Like a Frost Giant, you make $1 gazillion, you make like WoW level dollars. When do you cut it off? About like this is the peak for a healthy studio.
Going to what Tim was just talking about in terms of smaller companies that have come out of Blizzard, I think part of the thought process for a lot of us is a desire to work with small teams, and like big teams absolutely have their place. The scope of what you can do with a big team is different than the scope of what you can do with a small team. So it's not that one is good and one is bad. It's just I've found myself over the course of my career spending time at big companies and spending time at small companies, and I've enjoyed both. I think right now we're in a space where we do kind of crave that small team environment more, and there isn't a hard number. Like, we're gonna bring on the right number of people to build the game that we want to make. That number will be smaller than, for example, the World of Warcraft team. Is a pretty large team. And it's also a little hard to count. So, I think in our heads, we're kind of ballpark 50 is the right size for the game that we want to build, but recognizing that we're probably going to leverage a number of external partners to help us along the way with that. And those external partners might help in ways that other departments helped us back when we were at EA or at Blizzard, whether that's cinematics or esports or marketing, or legal, or customer support, quality assurance. There are so many departments that surround a development team and make what we do possible. So do you count them? I think they're just as important as we are, because the game can't be done without them. But if you include all those people, even if it's just 50 developers building the core game, there are still hundreds of people involved in what we deliver. Yeah,
it's funny. Like, I visited Blizzard, oh God, I don't even know when that was, years ago, and I was really struck on campus and just talking to developers how much love there was for like Heroes of the Storm. And it feels like there was love for that development team. It feels like that was it feels like developers within Blizzard were hungry to be the underdogs again, and like that team and that game felt like the Blizzard underdog. And now I feel like some of that enthusiasm has carried forward from like, okay, now let's actually just make our own underdog out there in the industry and have some of that fire in our belly that a lot of the former developers had for the Heroes of the Storm project.
Yeah, it's a little bit. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
Sorry. Oh, okay. I was going to say, yeah, working at big companies and small companies, they're very different. I wouldn't peg one as better than another. But for us, our focus is clear. We love RTS games. This is what we've come together to build. And for us, the right opportunity for that was as an independent studio. And I think within what we want to do for RTS, the right team size is relatively small compared to others because we want to be able to develop with agility, and we want to be able to iterate fast and in ways that large, cumbersome teams have trouble doing. So for us, it made sense that this really connected the dots with the type of game we want to make and how we want to make it. But I'll tell you, working within big companies has its other pros, you mature tool chains and resources and all these support departments and things like that. And so it's definitely not a one's better than the other sort of scenario, but this is definitely what we're wanting at this point, and it's definitely what's going to help us deliver the best possible game.
Yeah, I mean, since you mentioned you were there for the earliest days of StarCraft 2, what was that like? You weren't there for Warcraft 3, but what's your big standout memory of some of the earliest moments in StarCraft 2's development?
Oh boy. Yeah, that phase, we were prototyping StarCraft 2 and Warcraft 3's engine. That's so cool. We had, Warcraft 3 tile sets and had battle cruisers flying over in the very early days. That was back when we weren't entirely sure what direction to take StarCraft 2. StarCraft 1 obviously was phenomenally successful. And one of the challenges with building sequels is how much do you stray from that formula? How much do you change and innovate versus how much do you remain faithful to it? And that's a hard question to answer. I've worked on a lot of sequels over my years, and each one there's different considerations at play to really be a faithful sequel to that successful game versus to deliver something new that makes it a great game in its own right. And so we were doing technical prototypes. We were just starting on that journey, but I left before really the vision for StarCraft 2 firmed up.
Gotcha. Were you pushing for anything hard back in those early days with StarCraft 2?
At the time, I was pushing because my experience in War 3 were very focused as lead campaign designer on the storyline and the missions. I was pushing really hard on being able to innovate in campaigns and try some new ideas that we hadn't been able to do. I had just come off of building the Orc campaign for the Frozen Throne, where we tried some radically different ideas in terms of making them more hero-centric and letting people go back and forth between maps and having more of like an RPG experience. And that was really exciting for me to be able to build something that was distinctly different than everything that had come before. And so at the time, we were exploring ideas for that. Yeah.
And that was kind of, some of the branching paths in Wings of Liberty, that was those earliest days for that?
Yeah, we're all the way back there from the inception of the game. Those are things that we were talking about. And so, yeah, it's really interesting to be there at the very early days and then see the team that had to, go to battle to build this product and put all the effort in and, make all the sacrifices to build it and to see what comes out of it and to see the campaigns and the awesome branching choices and stuff. I think they were able to pull off things that I haven't seen in any other RTS to date in the campaigns. And so, yeah, my hat's off to the team that built that.
Yeah, and it's amazing that Tim M, then you kind of pick it up and keep that ball rolling a decade later. I mean, it's a crazy span of time that StarCraft 2 has had. But I'm curious, Tim C, do you remember like the first time StarCraft 2 was whispered about in the Blizzard office? I mean, even during War 3's development, were there discussions constantly, or was it like a big day when finally somebody stood up and mentioned StarCraft 2 as a thing that's possible here?
Oh, the team, at that point, the team one was, the RTS team. And so we knew something would be next, is it Warcraft, is it StarCraft, which number is it another expansion, and lots of stuff was getting talked about. But I think the dev team at the time, or any dev team in general on any type of game, once you've spent enough years working on one thing, a change is like a breath of fresh air, and it's exciting to experience it. So yeah, the team, I think, was super excited at that time when the decision was made to work on StarCraft 2. They had just been, spent I don't know how long, 6-7 years working on working on orcs, and now they get to do spaceships and aliens and all sorts of fun stuff.
Was it like a team meeting? Do you remember anything specific?
Oh boy. Yeah, not too much in terms of a specific instance when the team was told they were going to be working on StarCraft 2. It was a discussion. The team was actively involved with. We're discussing what they were passionate about, what they felt the right opportunities were. Should we do more expansions? Should we switch to StarCraft 2? Like, there was a lot of discussion, and that was actually probably the thing that stood out to me the most is that the Blizzard had an environment where people could be actively talking about that and having a voice in what the studio developed next. And that's not something I've seen at other big studios. Yeah,
absolutely. Tim M., you have reached out to folks for fundraising. One of those folks is Ed Freeze with One Up Ventures. What's it like working with Ed Freeze these days? How hands-on is he? Is it just as easy as him being like, well, Age of Empires was good, let's go for another RTS here?
Ed is building a really diverse collection of portfolio companies with his fund at One Up Ventures. And one of the things that he tries to cultivate is a sense of mutual support between his portfolio companies' founders. And so there's just this wonderful community of other people who are in a similar situation to us at Frost Giant. They're spinning up brand new studios. They're going through all of the logistical and operational things that we are, but also all of the creative challenges that we're going through building something new. So yeah, Ed, he's just a very community-oriented person, which is great. You can probably tell from what we've been saying earlier in this conversation, community matters a lot to us too. But much like our other investors, there is a sense of trust with Ed around what we're building. They kind of rely on us to define that creative vision and try to support us as best they can. So it's been wonderful working with Ed. Really grateful to have his support.
Yeah. Tim, see any good old stories? Do you get to ask him old questions about his history in the game industry?
No, that would be, I should totally do that.
Yeah, of course.
No, I think what we, with Ed and with our other investors, we've been incredibly blessed to have really supportive groups backing us to build this type of game. What we're setting out to do is pretty ambitious. We're a small company. We're trying to build a game that is going to carry the torch forward for Blizzard style RTS, built by one of the biggest and most successful and lauded companies out there, and then to talk about expanding the market even further. Like, what we're talking about doing, what we're trying to do is very ambitious, and we have investors who see the same opportunity, who feel the same tug towards the genre in terms of their background, like with Ed and with others too. They've either played and loved, or they've participated in making other types of games in the genre, and that groundswell of support from them has been fantastic. It's been staggering for Tim and I. We're super pleased with the support that they've given us on this journey.
Yeah. Tim C., how do you feel about the game industry these days? You've had such a wild ride. Like, after leaving Blizzard, it seems like quite a journey going to like Fireforge, that whole saga. I mean, System Shock 3. It seems like some tough development chapters in your history.
Oh, totally.
How do you?
Yeah, I'm incredibly thankful for the experiences I've been on, though. In every instance, whether it's games canceled even or things along those lines, I've had a chance to work with developers who are incredibly talented and incredibly passionate about what they're doing. And I have positive takeaways from every game I've worked on. And in many cases, I've continued working with some of the same people over the course of multiple companies. And I have a lot of respect for them. And so, I consider myself fortunate to have seen startups, to have seen big companies, to have seen wild successes, and also have seen some failures and struggles along the way. And I feel like each one of those has provided takeaways that have helped me become a better developer and become, I think, a better team member than I was earlier in my career. And I think going into Frost Giant has really provided me with the experience necessary to really take a stab at doing something that we're like we're trying to do that's as ambitious as what we're building.
Yeah. How important is it to have a win in your column like Wasteland 3. You know, you're the director for that project. That gets out the door and it's reviewed so well and fans seem happy. Does it really refill your sales?
Again, you know, I credit the community around that game too. Now it's maybe not as large as StarCraft's community, but they're a passionate group. People who've played it all the way back since, you know, Apple II days, you know, when Wasteland 1 first came out. And to have somebody like Brian still running that studio, who was around back then and had released the first one, has been an incredibly consistent influence for InXile's team, and I think has been a key part to that game turning out as well. The audience and the continuity in the leadership is, I think those both provided really the foundation for the team to build something great in. It's a lot easier to build something great and to really pour yourself into it when you feel like there's a community out there expecting it to be good and rooting for you and really pulling for you and giving you their support. And that was critical on that project. And I have to say on this project too, like I mentioned it earlier, and it's not just, you know, a hand wave. Like, we have been blown away by the audience and community support that we've received. It's totally beyond what we expected, and it really has given us a lot of encouragement. And hopefully we'll be able to, you know, build something that's incredibly successful as well. And we'll look back on this similar to Wasteland 3 and feel like we did our job really connecting a game that lived up to the expectations of the community.
Yeah. In that case, it was so weird because it's like, okay, it kind of, Microsoft, the acquisition happened later in development, and so Microsoft had to market Wasteland 3. Do you feel like it found its audience? Do you feel happy with the amount of people that found it, or is it kind of like going to be a hidden gem for a while for the larger game industry?
I was super happy with how it turned out.
Okay, great.
My understanding from Microsoft and InXile leadership, they're super happy with it too. It's a franchise that I hope continues for a long time to come in the future, and I can't wait to see what that team does next.
Yeah, definitely. Tim M., I have to ask, I'm so curious. You were working at Sony Santa Monica in the early days of God of War's development. I mean, the big reboot. Did you end up playing the game when it finally shipped?
Of course, yeah.
What'd you think about that version compared to what you experienced in the earliest days?
It's funny. It's kind of like Tim's comments earlier about seeing early StarCraft versus what got delivered. I think a lot of the threads of what that game became were underway when I was there. So seeing them come to fruition was really fun for me, but super talented team. I think just, you know, so proud of those guys for what they made. Yeah.
I mean, were you there before Corey was even brought back on board, or?
No, Corey was there when I got there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the team was going from pre-production to production when I was there. So yeah, just kind of helped get them set up for success, and had the opportunity to go work on StarCraft 2, which is one of my favorite games of all time. And tough decision, of course, but when Blizzard calls, it's hard to say no.
Yeah, I mean, they've talked about that wild moment in God of War's development where the other project, the mysterious sci-fi project that Sony Santa Monica was working on, got canceled. And then it was like, okay, and now God of War team, we have all these developers we don't want to let go, so you're hitting the ground running, go for it. And were you leading development during that explosion of developer talent?
That's exactly the moment I came in when that other project was canceled. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were hitting the ground running in that giant empty warehouse of ideas of like, okay, we need to start assembling something here.
Yeah, to their credit, I think the leadership team on God of War, Corey in particular, had a very clear vision for what he wanted to build. And there was a little bit of acceleration that happened as a result of having development resources free up. But it was just fortunate that there already was clear vision there for them to jump onto. Yeah.
Do you have any big lessons you learned from Shannon Sudstill, the head of the studio back then? She's been around for so long and seen so much.
I think subsequently moved on to Stadia. But while I was there, I think she was excellent at assembling great creators and, team building, setting the project up for success by getting the right people in place is a skill unto itself. And I think Shannon was great at that.
Yeah. Well, hey, I kept you on here for long enough. Any timeline you can share for this? Do you have a ballpark window for when fans should expect something more?
We are still years out, I would say, from having something that we're ready to actually have players play, but we're not committing to a specific time frame because we want to make sure that we achieve what we want to achieve. It's kind of more important to us that we build something great than it is that we hit a specific date.
Sure. And you're comfortable enough where it's like, okay, we can just keep our heads down and work on this thing for a Warcraft 3 level of time.
How long did War 3 take, Tim C? I don't even know.
Oh, jeez. I don't know. I think what's important is that we're not looking at this from a specific ship date where whatever we have at that time we're shipping. We're looking at this from the other perspective of how do we home in and build something that's really fun, that's really compelling, and then build a game around that core. And that takes iteration. That takes a lot of cycles to try things out, to toss them away. And that leads to timelines being imprecise. Anything we said right now would be wrong.
Sure.
Totally. That's actually the one outcome I'd put money on, is that whatever we tell you now is not when we're going to ship. So
yep.
But I do feel good saying we'll be faster than StarCraft 2 because StarCraft 2 I think was like 7 years to develop. So
okay,
we're not going to take that.
That's your timeline, man. You got to beat it.
We want to get to market as soon as we can ourselves because
Sure.
we're eager to share this game with the community and we really want to be able to go live with it. So obviously there is that a desire to like get to market as quickly as possible, but that's counterbalanced by we want to build a game that is at the quality level that we're talking about and we're not going to ship it before then. And so we need to find a way to build quality with that urgency and really strike a balance between those things.
Okay. I'm not asking what the setting is, but I'm asking, do you both feel like the setting is largely locked down and you know what it is?
We're moving that direction. We're working with some great writers. And one of them is Mickey Nielsen, who came out of Blizzard and was involved in a lot of different franchises at Blizzard, but really talented guy and fantastic to work with. And we're also working with Marv Wolfman, who has done some tremendous work in the comic book world. And he's just bringing a great perspective on character and motivations. And anyhow, I feel like we're on a really good trajectory, but we're certainly not done. And I don't know, Tim C, if you want to.
No, I would second what you're saying. I think we have a direction we're heading in for sure. I think we have built up some great traction around some core ideas that the writers are really doing a great job helping us flesh out. I think what still needs to be done is a lot of look dev and a lot of exploration about what that means in terms of a visual experience when you play the game. And so there's a lot more exploration that we have to do there on that side before we could say, yeah, we have a setting that's locked down.
Okay.
I think we have a much clearer idea now of where we're heading than we did when we first started the company.
Yeah. And scale of 1 to 10, when fans see the setting, how surprised will they be? Will it be, what the hell am I looking at? Or is it, oh, they went with fantasy. They went with sci-fi. They went with military. Or are you looking to wow them?
We're definitely looking to wow them in terms of having them get excited about what we're building. I think they'll see elements of a lot of places that we're coming from and what we ultimately put out there. But it's new. It's its own thing. It's not just going to be a rehash.
I think they'll be surprised by the My Little Ponies license, though. I think
interesting.
Maybe throw them for a loop.
Smart. I mean, on that note, I mean, you're fully committed to this being new IP, right? It's not a matter of some investor coming in and be like, how about you go ahead and make this, I don't know, League of Legends RTS.
You know, we explored different paths at the beginning, and one of those paths was around licensed IP. But I think in the end, we felt like RTS is pretty unique. And certainly there are IPs out there that you can imagine building an RTS in, and it's been done before. But to make the best thing possible, I think having the flexibility to just build this from the ground up is the right choice. And so that's where we're currently at.
Yeah.
When you think back to Warcraft or StarCraft and you think about how closely the identity of the race or the factions interrelated to their gameplay mechanics, they become inextricable at some point. And to really be able to pursue the gameplay we want, we need to be able to support that, I think, with a unique original IP world around it. I think as soon as you take a license, you can build a fantastic game there, but it does constrain you a bit on your creative freedom and how you can express gameplay within that license.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'm looking forward to the game. I know a lot of fans out there are looking forward to the game. Hats off to the team so far, and good luck on the long, difficult journey ahead of you. But we're all looking forward to meeting you on the other side.
Yeah, really appreciate it. And if there's, I guess, one thing I'd ask for from my side, from you and fans out there as well, is just to be patient with us. We're trying to do this right, and it does take time. And I'm sure there's a lot of desire to have some of these decisions made faster. But we're just really trying to make good decisions. So.
And I'd second that. And I'd also go further and ask for you and for everyone else out there to be vocal with us. We are doing our very best as a small company to engage with the community on social media in every outlet that we can. We have newsletters going out. We are posting comments on Reddit, questions, topics. We're trying to actively get discussions going in the community. These discussions, we don't always have the bandwidth or the people to be able to respond as much as we want to, but we are actively looking at what the community is saying. We're actively reading the discussions and trying to pay attention. So please, by all means, let us know what you want to see us build, and let us know your thoughts as we share more and more about what we're building. It matters a lot to us, and it helps make the game better.
Cool. Well, hey, Tims, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so for talking with us.
Yeah, and thanks so much for watching or listening to this interview from MinnMax. You can always subscribe to our YouTube channel, check out our other interviews as well. We have a lot in there. We have an interview very related to this. We have John Dickerson from 60 Minutes talking about why he loves Age of Empires so much. So if you're an RTS fan, you'd probably enjoy that very nerdy conversation on a couple levels, but it's a good time. But thanks for watching, everybody. Bye! If you are sick of snark, clickbait, and an avalanche of movie news, you can help support independent games media by subscribing to MinnMax's YouTube channel here, or checking out the benefits over on Patreon. It's a nice, clean handshake. You support us, and we won't make dumb, condescending stuff for you. Your support helps us continue our mission of focusing on games, friends, and getting better. Patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. We'd appreciate it.